Great. Hello, everyone. Glad that everyone's been able to join today. I'm looking forward to our conversation. And as Vonnie indicated in the kickoff, please feel free to chime in with questions. That will allow us to go deeper into areas that are of interest to you. Today's topic, you have a new structure, now what, came to me over the last few months because as I've been interacting with some organizations, they've raised for me different questions about how do I really get the most out of the organization design that I've put in place. A lot of time, sometimes investment is committed, and people sometimes struggle to really maximize that value. And so I felt like today's conversation really should dive into how do I take it from just the blueprint and really turn it into something that we can maximize. So hopefully that's a topic that will resonate with many of you. And hopefully through our dialogue today, we can get some new insights that will help us be more effective. Now, just in terms of background, some of you may not be as familiar with AlignOrg Solutions. We are a niche organization design firm, and we help organizations go through organization transformations. We do that through helping organizations clarify their strategy, diagnose the capabilities in their organization, realign their businesses, facilitate the change and transformation journey, and many other things. A large part of what we do is we help organizations actually do this by rolling up our sleeves and getting in the trenches with them, which is really what leads to some of these conversations that we have in these webinars, is because we're in the trenches doing this kind of work and we hear of things that seem to be pertinent, and that's what leads to a learning session like this. And we do these learning sessions because the other part of what we try to do in our practice is do a lot of capability building. We go into firms and organizations and we help build their internal muscle by doing training workshops, doing coaching, co-facilitated work, all with the intent of helping to build the internal muscle of professionals around organization design and change. So that's really what we're about. Today in our webinar, we may touch on a few stories, not necessarily from just these organizations, but whether you're reading in the paper or whether or not you have interactions in your own organization. We certainly touch a lot of different organizations, sometimes in conferences, sometimes by doing client work with them. We find that those stories and insights and case studies give us some really good ideas that can be portable and transferable, and so we like to do that as a way to share. Now, to get things kicked off today, I wanted to hearken to an article that we wrote about 3 years ago. There's a link here if someone wants to go and actually access it. But in that article, we highlighted what we saw as being 10 of the most significant benefits that a organization could achieve if they achieved, a decent, if not a good level of alignment. And as you scan down this list, whether it's speed of decision making or fewer wasted resources or less customer confusion or greater resource visibility, positive impacts to your culture, whatever it might be, these are the kind of things that sometimes get lost when we install a new organization, but we don't really figure out how to make it work effectively. And when you look down this list of benefits, who wouldn't want many of these benefits in their organization? And I would bet if we polled people on today's webinar, many of us at times feel like our organizations lack some of these benefits. Things might seem slow, our employees are getting disengaged, it feels like we're wasting resources and not putting them on the most important or strategic activities. Customers are sort of confused on who to call and where to go get help and how to expedite things through, frankly, the complications and confusion that we've created in our organizations. So hopefully, as we go through today's discussion, in your mind, you'll be thinking about your organization and you'll say to yourself, what benefit are we really looking to realize in our organization that we've not been able to realize? And is there something that we can take away from today's discussion that might help us as an organization realize that particular benefit? Now, the topics we want to cover today, I've broken down sort of into four topic areas. The first one is connecting structure to the work and the people. The second one is how do we insert into a new organization the connective tissue that will help things get done. Thirdly, how do we remove other misalignments that are going to undermine performance? And then finally, how do we prepare for a transformation journey that's actually going to affect behavior and performance? And so hopefully as we touch on these various topics, we can go deeper. And as you can see, in my mind, I see these things as being real keys to an effective organization. And as I mentioned at the outset, as I've interacted with some of my colleagues at different clients over the last few months, many of them have been coming with these kinds of real-life problems saying, look, we've made some changes and we're not seeing the benefits. Why are we not seeing them? And they start to unpack their issues. And interestingly, they seem to fall kind of into these four areas. And so that's why this is going to be our agenda for today. So without further ado, let's dive into the first topic here around connecting structure to the work and to people. And the reason this is a real key for me, and probably the first key, is because too many times as I work with organizations, I see the org chart take a preeminent place in the thinking of leaders and of practitioners and of organization members, but it really does not always communicate how work is supposed to be done and how talent is going to best be allocated and or resourced. And so if the links between the structure, the work, and people are not clear, then in some respects, your organization design is missing a lot of the fundamental elements that are going to be necessary. I like to use analogies from time to time. If I'm thinking about building a building, building a home, and I'm constructing it from the ground up, if I put up the walls, and that represents sort of the structure of the home or the building, there's so many other things that have to go along with those walls to really make it a livable edifice when we're finished. If I don't have wiring, if I don't have plumbing, if I haven't thought about how windows and doors and other kinds of access points are going to be worked out, then it's a really sort of rudimentary building, if anything, at that point. And so if we don't think through the full design of how the structure ties to the work to be done, which connects to the people and talent, then we really are missing some of the fundamental elements. So let's talk a little bit about how this happens. Having done some work, with an organization that does some engineering, one of the things that we found interesting is, okay, here's the org chart. Okay, that's great. I'm sure for the folks involved, they saw it and were like, yeah, that means so much to us. For all of us here on the webinar today, we glance at it and go, okay, yeah, looks like my engineering team, or I've seen things like this before in jobs that I've done. Now, you'll notice that one of the things that we're trying to do at this is to start to highlight of these roles, which ones are changed and which ones are brand new to this organization. Why is that important? Well, because that's going to start to show those connections between where the structure connects to new work, and that new work is going to imply where I might need new or different talent. Now, that may seem pretty obvious, but in many of the organization redesigns I've been involved in, that small little connection between the structure and boxes is not made to where we anticipate new roles being needed and new talent or skill sets. So that's one little image of this. Let me go a step further to try to illustrate this even more than just an org chart with a couple of little green and red dots on them. This is the same organization, but now we're drilling deeper into the actual work of that organization. This happens to be what we call a value point map, and it's a form of process design, and this happens to be around the engineering design process. And as you can see, around these sort of blue chevron type images, I guess that's a chevron, It talks about the requirements being compiled and the design being created and a baseline and analysis of the design and so on. And it's going to continue on to the next page. And under each of those big chevrons are activities. And those activities are great. And what this is really doing is now suggesting how the work is to be done. And if I advance to the next slide, you can see a further continuation of this process. Now, I'm not an engineer. I don't understand all the details of what are here, and that's not what's really important in my mind right now. What is important, however, is you'll notice at the top these bars that are green and blue and gray and brown and yellow and dark blue and so forth. Those are indicating places where a new role or a role is needed and who's going to have responsibility for that work. And I'm hoping what starts to emerge here is a link between a structure, of which some of these roles were in that structure, the work to be done, and then a tie to the specific role for what activities they're going to be responsible for. And if we take this a step further even, we often see ourselves clarifying decision rights as a result of doing this. Now, you'll notice in this particular decision right table, I didn't capture every activity that were in those process flows, but I instead just captured a few of the key decisions, which is not uncommon, and then sort of took some of the key roles and indicated who had the decision right.